Since when did some people mistake kindness and love for weakness? It's really scary. My colleagues at work were jealous of me, so they decided to humiliate me and take my wife away so that they could gather together in bars and laugh at me. I didn't just leave it like that. My life took a nosedive as I passed by the conference room. Bill was showcasing photos from yesterday's wedding on the large screen. What caught my eye was in the background, Darren Bryant, my nemesis, with his arm around my wife Judith as they headed to a hotel. Bill knew Judith well enough to understand the situation, yet no one had bothered to clue me in. Some friends and colleagues. From the group's laughter, I gathered they all had seen it and knew already. Not only that, it wasn't news to them. I didn't pause. If they spotted me, they didn't show it. I pushed away the thought that they might have seen and were laughing at me. Later, I found out that was the grim reality. Our manager, Donald Harvey, kept making me cover for Bryant. That afternoon, once again, I had to fill in for him. Harvey even canceled my holiday because Bryant had some urgent course. Judith went alone, or so I thought. Now, who knows? For the rest of the afternoon, work was the last thing on my mind. I plotted revenge against my cheating wife, that bastard Bryant, and those supposed colleagues of mine. I wouldn't stay a minute longer than necessary. I headed straight to HR to inquire about my notice period and annual leave. I knew I had at least 7 weeks owed to me. Turns out Harvey hadn't actually canceled my leave. I showed Stella the email proving his attempt and its reason. She just gazed at me sadly. Even she was aware of the truth. I was extremely angry. I went through everything with her and her neighbor, the financial controller. I am extremely organized, which greatly facilitates my work. Perhaps it's true that I have OCD. I keep meticulous records of all my work and expenses. I was able to demonstrate that Harvey was falsifying records to withhold payments from me, which were instead going to Bryant. Ultimately, they confirmed that I was owed 9 weeks and 3 days of annual leave. I was entitled to over $17,000 that had been paid to Bryant. Stella printed everything out. I made copies because I no longer trusted anyone. My notice period was 12 weeks due to my specialized skills. I returned to my desk and wrote my resignation letter. Instead of giving it to Harvey, I simply glared at him until he became visibly uncomfortable. I had always been compliant. My only grievances arose when I had to cover for Bryant. I went to see the CEO, David Bennett, a member of the family that owned the company. His secretary informed me he was busy. I insisted that I needed to see him urgently, stating that I would involve a lawyer if necessary. She was taken aback by my tone. This was a different side of me. She spoke to him again, and he told her he would be free in 20 minutes, asking me to return then. I could sense something was off by his tone. Later, as I reflected on it, I realized he was trying not to laugh. I came back and he made me wait. 10 minutes later, he let me in. There was no handshake or apology for the wait. "Well, Adam, what's got you so riled up?" he smirked. I was surprisingly calm. "Here's my resignation. I've had enough. My leave was canceled, supposedly for the firm's benefit. Everyone laughs behind my back while Darren Bryant sleeps with my wife, and I cover his work. Harvey falsifies the pay sheets, so Bryant gets paid for my work, and you're owed over $17,000. You'll see those accounts there. Despite Harvey's attempts to give my leave to Bryant, I have just over 2 weeks left to work. I'll work them, but I won't cover for Bryant. He can go to hell. He might even have a very serious accident." Bennett was not only silent but also gloating, his face showing delight in my distress. "You didn't know Bryant was sleeping with your wife, did you? Man, you're blind. He boasts about it every single time. I'll sort out your money now, so just get out of here." I knew exactly where I stood. I had 2 weeks to settle the score with everyone here, especially Bryant. When I walked out of his office, even his secretary looked terrified. My expression must have shown I was ready for trouble. Back at my desk, I noticed others glancing at me, but no one approached. They had never seen me this angry before. I finished my work on time. Harvey had me use my personal phone for work to save money, so I removed the company SIM and left it on my desk. I wasn't staying a minute longer than necessary. As I left, some stared at me like I was a stranger. Bill asked, "You're leaving on time for once, Adam. What's going on?" "I have an appointment," I replied curtly, and kept walking. Thursday evening was late-night shopping. Even the banks were open. I went to the bank, opened new accounts in my name only, and discovered the joint account I shared with Judith had a very low balance with missed payments. I asked why it hadn't been replenished from her account as agreed. It turned out Judith had canceled her contributions 10 months ago. The assistant apologized for revealing this, and I reassured her I wouldn't report it. My anger grew as I left the bank and headed home. I needed time to think and plan. Let me introduce myself. I'm Adam Halliday, 29 years old, moderately attractive. I stay in shape by going to the gym several nights a week and doing some running. I work as a mechanical engineer with advanced skills in electrical and computer systems, specializing in fixing major issues with expensive computerized machinery. This often requires me to travel, as local maintenance teams often lack the necessary expertise. I prefer to work behind the scenes, focusing on doing my job exceptionally well rather than seeking attention. People sometimes underestimate me, as you've heard at there. However, I'm far from foolish. I'm diligent and unfortunately made the mistake of trusting someone who didn't deserve it, both personally and professionally. I've always wanted the best for our company. I'm willing to assist anyone, except Darren Bryant, whom I've disliked since childhood. He's beyond what I would even call unpleasant. Judith has treated me poorly for a long time, and now I understand why. I've tried to talk to her, but she always manages to avoid meaningful conversation. She's accustomed to getting her way. Initially, I tolerated it because I loved her and wanted her happiness, but lately, it's been to avoid her sharp remarks. It might seem like I lack a backbone, but I believed love meant prioritizing her desires. Clearly, that wasn't the case in her world. Once I arrived home, I headed straight to my office. Working from home meant fewer interruptions, which I valued greatly. Thankfully, we didn't have children, so I had converted one room into a workspace. Tonight, I was about to embark on the most critical plan of my life. To set the stage, if Judith had been involved in a brief affair with anyone else, I might have considered counseling, despite how unlikely it seemed to salvage our marriage. I'd been attempting to pin her down to discuss our marital issues, but she always claimed to be too busy. However, she knew my intense dislike for Bryant was absolute, making this situation irreparable. It was a deliberate act meant to deeply wound me. The fact that it was him hurt even more than the betrayal itself, and that was painful enough. After discovering the truth at the bank, I meticulously reviewed my bank statements from the past 2 years. I transferred relevant transactions into an Excel spreadsheet. Similarly, I examined my credit card statements, cross-referencing them with payments made to that hotel against my work schedule. It became apparent that payments were being made 6 to 10 times a month, often on days I had substituted for Bryant at other locations. I'm certain they found it amusing that I was unwittingly funding their affairs. While I hoped Bryant contributed financially at times, I doubted it given his track record. Even today, I was on my way to one of his assignments when I got a call, and it was canceled due to measures to isolate myself from the virus at the factory. If it hadn't been for that call, I wouldn't have ended up in the office and stumbled across this photo. I also filled in for Bryant the day before. During Judith's vacation, the very holiday that Harvey forced me to cancel, a lot of deals were made. I contacted a photographer, considering the time difference might mean he was working. After identifying myself to the receptionist, I apologized and inquired about the photos he had taken, explaining that there had been a fire and they were lost. I asked if he still had them on record. The receptionist checked and confirmed they did. She offered to print and mail them to me at a cost, or to email them so I could print them myself or use a professional service. I opted for the email option, considering international postage challenges. I created a file to organize all the information I was gathering. The photos confirmed my suspicions. Bryant was involved with my wife, at my expense. Judith enjoys splurging on the newest cars, which she leases. Last year, she carelessly left her driver's license and bank cards behind, prompting everything to be put under my name. Not surprisingly, she hasn't kept up with the car payments. With the lease ending in 2 months, I saw an opportunity. I'll enjoy my car until then, but won't extend the lease. I needed access to her accounts. When we got married, Judith insisted on maintaining her own account to keep her spending private from me. We agreed to contribute separately to a joint account for household expenses, like council tax, groceries, utilities, and vacations. To secure myself, I changed all access passwords on my computer, phone, and safe. I verified the existence of the prenuptial agreement Judith's father required and made a copy, storing it discreetly. I gave it a technical name so Judith would overlook it if she tried to access my logins. This file and other important documents are safely stored in a cloud vault, protected by a VPN for added security. I also use a key generator to ensure robust passwords. I calculated all the money Judith owed me. It totaled just over $47,000. For 14 months, I had been covering the expenses for that hotel room. Actually, I footed the bill. The holiday alone cost $11,000. We had a joint savings account with $105,000 in it. The plan was to use it to expand this house, an idea of mine because it has spacious rooms and a large plot, perfect for our future kids to play in when she was ready to have them. We had discussed having children before marriage, but shortly after she shifted focus towards her career. If I didn't like it, tough luck. I kept questioning myself why I endured her nonsense for so long. She wanted to purchase a rabbit hutch in an upscale neighborhood. I refused, which greatly irritated her. It was probably one of the few times I stood my ground. Consequently, the house fund remained untouched. She hadn't contributed to it for a year either, whereas I had added $6,000. Now, looking at her intentions, if we had moved, her name would have been on the property. My home would have covered a significant portion of the expenses. She could have claimed a share of that new house in our divorce. I consider myself fortunate to have dodged that bullet. I transferred $105,000 to my new account. If she complained, I planned to argue that her share was offset by her debt to me. After completing all necessary money transfers, I canceled the debit and credit cards linked to our joint account. Looking back, I realize I should have paid closer attention to our finances, but Judith handled all of that. Why did I trust her, especially considering how she treats me? Judith still wasn't home by the time I finished, so I popped a pizza in the oven. If Bryant hadn't called her, she wouldn't have known I was aware. If she didn't return home, they would have. Just as I was finishing the pizza, she walked in. Her shock was evident as she gasped, "I thought you were at the office." I casually replied with a smile, "I had an appointment and left my phone there. No big deal." She visibly relaxed, saying, "I've already eaten. I'm going for a shower," as she hurried towards our room. I could hazard a guess why. I waited until I heard the sound of the shower. She came in and, as usual, dropped her handbag on the table. I seized the opportunity to open it and remove her purse and phone. Logging into her computer with her credentials, I used her bank card to manipulate the card reader and access her accounts. Apart from the ones I was aware of, she had 2 other accounts each holding more than $100,000. I transferred all this data to my own files. Additionally, I downloaded the contents of her emails and accessed her phone using her universal PIN, saving copies of her texts and calls. After replacing everything back in her handbag, I relaxed with a cup of tea until she joined me downstairs. She appeared rather plain compared to her usual work attire. I decided to tease her. "You didn't think I was worth dressing up for, huh?" She gave me her customary disdainful look. "I'm tired. Maybe another time?" I chuckled. Sure, why not? It's only been a year since you last let me near you. At this rate, we might as well divorce, or maybe I'll get an annulment since you're still a virgin. She gazed at me, probing for the meaning behind my words. She was displeased, but I was indifferent. I continued. Bill was sharing photos from the wedding at the office yesterday when I walked in. She glanced at me. I wouldn't have thought you'd care. I didn't. Is this Marion's third marriage? Maybe this time she'll stay faithful to the poor sap who married her. She scrutinized me closely. That's a cruel thing to say. I've never heard you talk about someone like that before. I pressed on. I heard she caused a scene at her bachelorette party. You were there. Spill the beans. She was furious. You shouldn't listen to gossip. It was uneventful. I pushed further. That's not what the office gossip says. I hope she and her friends got tested afterward. Judith stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door. I knew I had struck a nerve. I returned to my office and brushed up on the divorce laws. The good news was that I had owned the house before we got married, so she had no claim to it. Typically, assets are split 50-50 in the absence of children, which worked in my favor since her two substantial accounts were on my side. Alimony could be awarded if one spouse earned significantly more than the other. The prenuptial agreement specified deviations from the standard settlement in cases of adultery. The innocent party wouldn't have to pay alimony, and there would be no claim on other assets like a car. All expenses would be borne by the adulterer. I was grateful her father had insisted on the prenup. Knowing I needed more evidence, as Judith, Bennett, and Bryant would deny everything, I planned to call an old friend, Danny, who worked as a local plumber. He frequently did jobs at that hotel, and his tales of what he found in the toilets there were always good pub conversation. Now, I suspected some of those knickers belonged to Judith. I retired to the guest room for the night. I wasn't going to give the cold-hearted woman any opportunity to thaw. The following day, I went to work and then off to a personal assignment. Judith's remark, "I thought you were in the office," had raised my suspicions that my phone was being monitored. After checking my SIM card and finding no tracker, I inserted my work SIM card and confirmed it was concealed as described online. I purchased a $20 phone and used the company SIM card with it, planning to leave this phone at work. En route to my assignment, I phoned Danny and briefed him on Judith and Bryant's activities. Danny shared my dislike for Bryant, who had been a school bully until I confronted him. Next time, he'd think twice. Danny was visiting the hotel that day and promised to update me later. He also had an idea regarding evidence. I returned to the office by 4 p.m., and surprisingly, my job had gone smoothly. Visiting the finance department, I updated my new account details, stressing that they were to remain confidential. The seriousness in my voice surprised the staff. I left promptly at 5 p.m. Danny called, suggesting we meet for a drink later, so we agreed to meet at 8 p.m. at our local pub. Judith wasn't at home, so I made myself dinner and sat down in front of the TV. She returned around 7:30 and was surprised to see me there. "I'm leaving," I told her. "I have a hot date. Maybe I'll catch you on Monday." She just looked at me and smiled. "Then she will be disappointed." I chuckled. Maybe she'll find me more intriguing than she is." I left before I could laugh. She was furious. A direct hit. I began to realize that my life was about to change for the better. Danny bought a drink and we sat down in a quiet corner, away from everyone else. "Adam, you don't deserve this. You're a good person, always ready to help others. It's appalling that no one at your workplace informed you. They can all go to hell. Bryant is widely disliked. Remember Kate Duncan? He used to bully her in school, pulling her hair and calling her names. She now works at the hotel and is single, incredibly attractive, the kind you fantasize about. She would never get involved with a married man like me. I told her about your situation. For some reason, she still has a crush on you. Remember when Bryant pulled her hair and you beat him up? That day, you were like a force of nature, unstoppable. If he had hidden behind a brick wall, you would have torn through it to get to him. No one tried to intervene because we all wanted Bryant to pay. They have reservations next week, Wednesday and Thursday. Kate will ensure they get a specific room. We'll place a hidden camera there to record them. After they're done, I'll make up an excuse about a blocked toilet and remove the camera, giving you the SD card. It's so discreet it fits inside the smoke alarm covering the bed. I told him I owe it to both of you. He smiled. No, he deserved it. I thought Judith was smarter. We had a couple more beers and I went home. When I got home, Judith laughed. Did you disappoint her? I shook my head. She was scared when she saw how big I was. Her last boyfriend, Darren Bryant, had a small instrument. Can you believe that? I always knew he wasn't talking about anything. Judith blushed, trying to figure out what I was getting at. She looked worried. I decided to tone it down. I needed them to continue their meeting. The next morning, she suggested that we go to the dealership and look for a new car as the lease was almost expired. You mean my new car? It's fully registered in my name and you haven't paid a cent for it. We can leave and I'll let them know that I'll return it when the lease expires. She looked completely shocked. She left without waiting for me and returned 15 minutes later. My debit and credit cards are not working. What have you done? Stop it, she screamed. I replied calmly. I was checking the bill because I thought I had paid the bill, but I received an email saying it had not been paid. I noticed that you haven't deposited anything into the family account for a year. I don't support your lifestyle when you treat me badly. I canceled the cards. Use your damn cards. She was even angrier. I rarely ever swore at her. It must be a bank mistake, she nearly screamed. No, they showed me the instruction from you canceling the mandate. No mistake. How? She screamed. I called them to inquire because I thought it was an error. Turns out the mistake was trusting you with our finances. I thought she might explode. The hinges on that bedroom door and the frame took another beating. We didn't speak for the rest of the weekend. I did mow the lawn and tidy the garden. I painted the decking by our bedroom since the smell of deck paint makes her sick. On Monday at work, I caught up on my paperwork and wrote emails to my clients explaining my upcoming departure from Bennett's. Despite offers from others to hire me, I never pursued them due to my sense of loyalty, or perhaps foolishness. I planned to send these emails just before leaving, keeping them password protected to maintain confidentiality. I also updated all my work codes. Harvey wasn't at the office, which disappointed me. I had expected him to confront me about resigning and the money he owed me. I was eager for an opportunity to confront him physically. Later, I went to see my solicitor, Dawn, whom I've known since school. I discussed the situation and the need for a new will. I wanted to ensure that Judith would not inherit anything from me if something happened to me. Dawn quickly drafted a new will that explained my reasons clearly to prevent any legal challenges. I decided to leave my house to my nephew and niece, my sister's children, despite knowing it would upset Judith as my sister dislikes her intensely. This arrangement would allow them to live in the house without transferring the title to Judith. I didn't trust her husband either, especially the way he looked at Judith, suggesting he might know about her infidelity. Leaving the house directly to my sister could entitle him to a share in any divorce settlement, although inheritance isn't typically considered marital property. Legally, Judith was entitled to a portion of the cash until the divorce proceedings concluded, but Dawn advised me on strategies to minimize the amount classified as cash. After finalizing the details, she planned to have her secretary type everything up. If I returned later that afternoon, I could sign it, get it witnessed, and notarized. I did just that, and it was signed as planned. Dawn then brought up the topic of the divorce. I expressed my thoughts, and she offered to assist me at a discounted rate, since she also disliked Bryant. Apparently, no one from our school had anything good to say about him. Personally, I might attend his funeral, but solely to help load him into the crematorium. If he were buried, I'd dance on his grave and relieve myself on it. I recounted the events at Bennett's, including the holiday and the hotel. I anticipated having video evidence by the end of the week, after which I planned to evict the cheater. I detailed what I found on Judith's phone. Texts plotting their affair and ridiculing me as a cuckold and loser. Even Judith joined in, belittling me. The emails exposed Harvey, Bennett, and Bryant scheming to fund Bryant's vacation with Judith at my expense. They found it all quite amusing. Dawn instructed me to email her all the evidence. She would handle the divorce paperwork and also draft documents to sue Bennett and the others for their illegal actions. She knew someone who could serve Judith either at home or at her workplace. I chuckled at the thought. Dawn noticed and asked, "If we film their Wednesday rendezvous, can we serve Judith right after they leave on Thursday?" We both laughed. "I never knew you had such a vindictive side," Dawn remarked. "It's brilliant." Danny and Kate set up a camera that captured them. I watched some of the footage. This confirmed my suspicions about its size. Judith didn't seem to be enjoying herself at all. If they talked, it was usually to belittle me. Bryant never explained to her that I knew about their affair. Kate passed the footage to Danny, who then emailed it to me. Kate also replaced the camera for their second meeting. Dawn filed the documents with the court on Thursday morning and received them later that day. She asked for it as a favor. Everyone seems to dislike Bryant. That day, as they were leaving the hotel room, the sheriff's officer handed Judith the documents. She screamed and cried. As for me, I didn't care. Following Dawn's instructions, he removed the house and car keys from her key fob. I had left work early that day. I packed all of her belongings in black garbage bags and left them by the front door for her to collect. I kept her engagement ring, which is a family heirloom, along with the expensive diamond earrings, bracelet, and necklace set she insisted on having for our honeymoon. I also included all of her paperwork. I was meticulous, even putting all her dirty laundry in a bag. My landline rang and I saw her parents' number on the caller ID. I picked up. Her father yelled, "What the hell have you done?" before I hung up. He called again, shouting the same accusations. I hung up again. This repeated 6 times until her sister Janine called. At least she was trying to talk calmly. "Adam, can you explain what's going on? Judith is a wreck. We can't make sense of what she's saying. She mentioned something about a divorce. What's happened?" I took a deep breath. "Janine, Judith has treated me terribly for over a year. Nothing I did was ever right. It turns out she's been having an affair with Darren Bryant for the last 14-15 months. I just found out about it. There's a lot more, but we're finished. You can come pick up her things. The locks have been changed, as per the prenup your father insisted on to protect his mistress." When I spoke, all that could be heard was his loud yelling at me. I hung up the phone. An hour later, Janine arrived alone in their large car. I assisted her in loading everything into it. She asked questions, and I provided more explanations to her. She shook her head, saying, "She always was foolish and selfish. She had a wonderful man like you and threw it away for someone like Bryant. He's not even worthy to tie your shoelaces. I feel so sorry for you." After they left the hotel, Danny retrieved the video camera, so we had 2 days' worth of evidence. He handed me the camera as Dawn had requested. I picked up the car from the hotel parking lot and went to bed early. Tomorrow at work promised to be interesting. Before entering the main office, I went to the kitchen and filled a box with chocolates. Actually, a lot of tempting chocolates. There are many people with a sweet tooth in that office. It's a shame I changed the contents to include laxative chocolates, very potent ones. I visited the toilets, opened the vending machine for protective equipment, and sprinkled them with a light powder containing itchy ingredients and chili. I wiped the toilet seats, toilet paper, and paper towel dispensers. I did not forget about the women's toilets either. Poison ivy would have been my first choice, but I've never worked near a factory that had a large patch of it. I would have preferred that to get my revenge. I walked into the office and immediately felt that everyone knew about what had happened the day before. They were shocked that I had taken such action. They openly discussed it, but did not mention the fact that Bryant was also involved with my wife. I accessed my email and forwarded the messages to my clients before erasing all traces. I expected today to mark my departure. With the help of the program, I cleared the free space of my computer from any data that can be restored. Bennett soon left his office, accompanied by Harvey and Bryant, who were clearly furious. Bennett screamed, "Why couldn't you just leave it as it is, cuckold? You're a pathetic loser. Why hang out your dirty laundry? No one needs a loser like you." Bryant grinned. "Why bring up the subject of your divorce and accuse me of adultery? You're just confirming to everyone that you're a cuckold. She needed a real man." I chuckled at his words, which seemed to only make him angrier. He continued, "You could just refer to irreconcilable differences. It wouldn't have changed anything." I spoke calmly so that everyone could hear. His name suits him perfectly. Wherever he works, he will be closely monitored. Any woman he looks at will realize that he is cheating on her. This means that the divorce will be finalized in a few weeks, not in a year. I'm not a loser. I trusted some people, and they betrayed me. I will take revenge. Tomorrow will be another day. You're all disgusting." Bennett screamed, "Leave now. Don't wait for a recommendation or money that you think is owed to you." I handed him the letter from Dawn and put on a small video camera to film him receiving it. I addressed them slowly, but loudly. "This is a complaint of workplace harassment, theft, and harassment, including little Bryant with a tiny tool that we needed a magnifying glass to find him. Judith didn't even notice it. I have all your emails and text messages in which you suggest that he replace me for this holiday." I turned to the passers-by in a rage. "You all knew, but no one had the decency to tell me. Don't ever try to talk to me again. You are the dregs of society. This place is a dump. How many more people are covering for their so-called friends and colleagues, sleeping with each other's spouses?" Some of these words struck a chord with several viewers. I don't need links to this place. When this comes up in court, who will vouch for Bennett? I looked Bryant in the eye, flashing my best sinister smile. "See you again, you little jerk." He was clearly panicking. I left. When I saw the fury on Bennett's face, I was satisfied. I almost expected him to have a stroke, enough to ruin his miserable life. Unfortunately, this did not happen. I went home. There were several messages on the answering machine. Janine was worried about me, and Judith wanted to see me. Her mother called, hoping to establish a relationship with Judith. I called Janine. "I don't want to talk to this woman. It's over between us. Let her be with Bryant or whoever she wants. I'm done with her." Janine understood. I decided to take a vacation and drove around the country in my car, which was actually quite comfortable and spacious. 3 weeks later, I returned home. When I was parking, a neighbor came up to me. "Adam, some people tried to break into your house. I called the police and they arrested them. They left their details so that you can contact them." I expressed gratitude to him. I contacted the police and spoke with an officer, who turned out to be Judith's father and brother. They were present because Judith claimed ownership of her engagement ring and a diamond set, although they hadn't attempted to break in. They were advised to seek legal counsel regarding the property. I thanked the officer. I felt satisfaction knowing Judith was upset. 6 weeks later, I attended the divorce hearing in court. I noticed Avril, Dawn's sister, and a local newspaper reporter, seated in the press area. This promised to be interesting. Judith's lawyer began by stating that his client didn't desire a divorce, admitting only to a few indiscretions and expressing regret for any pain caused. She requested the court mandate counseling to salvage the marriage. Alternatively, she claimed her husband had withdrawn $105,000 from their joint account, and she was entitled to half. Dawn interjected, proposing that Mrs. Halliday testify about her actions. Her lawyer tried to prevent this, and the judge noted his reluctance. Dawn persisted. "Your Honor, this marriage is irreparable. Mrs. Halliday had an affair with Darren Bryant, with support from Mr. Halliday's manager and the firm's owner, where Bryant also works. Mr. Halliday was dismissed from his job because he dared to divorce this adulteress instead of continuing to tolerate their games. The affair had been ongoing for about 15 months before her husband discovered it. She intentionally pursued it, knowing of the long-standing animosity between Bryant and her husband, dating back to their school days, when Bryant was a bully until Mr. Halliday intervened. Despite Mr. Halliday's efforts to mend relations by planning a holiday, which was later canceled due to pressure from his superiors, Bryant ended up going instead. A year ago, my client was left covering for Bryant during a crucial course, a situation entirely fabricated. Mrs. Halliday's decision to take Bryant on vacation instead of her husband underscores her blatant disregard for him. Since then, my client has had no physical relationship with his wife, a fact he now finds relieving. Regarding the division of assets, Mrs. Halliday insisted on maintaining separate personal accounts alongside a joint account for household expenses. Initially, both parties contributed monthly through bank mandates until Mrs. Halliday unilaterally ceased her contributions 10 months prior to their separation. Despite this, she continued to spend lavishly on her affair, solely from the joint account, which was now funded solely by Mr. Halliday, totaling more than $47,000. Correspondence between them via email and texts openly boasts about these expenditures. The documents I will soon submit to the court include the bills for their hotel room and the relevant account details. Contrary to her claims, these meetings occurred not once or twice, but regularly over 15 months, averaging 6 to 10 times a month, if not more. According to Mr. Halliday's neighbors, a man resembling Bryant frequently visited their home during Mr. Halliday's prolonged absences due to work. While minor transgressions might be mended with effort and goodwill from both parties, such a blatant violation of marital trust leaves no room for reconciliation. The $105,000 in the account was intended for home improvements or relocation. In the past year, Mrs. Halliday made no contributions, whereas Mr. Halliday continued to invest $6,000. Additionally, Mrs. Halliday neglected to cover the lease payments for her car, deliberately registered under Mr. Halliday's name to shift the financial burden to him, as evidenced by her texts and emails. Any claims Mrs. Halliday asserts she is owed are outweighed by what she owes Mr. Halliday for depleting funds from their joint account. Judith's lawyer objected, arguing that what occurred couldn't be considered theft. Dawn countered that it depended on interpretation. Judith, her father, and their solicitor were unamused. I simply smiled, benevolently. Dawn continued, before the marriage, both parties signed a prenuptial agreement. Judith's solicitor interjected, we contest the relevance of this document. We believe it misinterprets the law. Dawn went on, it was drafted by my esteemed colleague, glancing at Judith's solicitor. It allows for the division of marital assets but excludes alimony for the affected partner. Mr. Halliday owned the house before marriage, inherited after his parents died in a car accident. His financial accounts at the time of separation are detailed here. Apart from the $105,000 mentioned earlier, he possessed $34,900 in assets. Cars are not considered assets. Our investigation into Mrs. Halliday's finances revealed she had acquired assets totaling $53,400 since the marriage. Mr. Halliday was aware of these accounts. Furthermore, we uncovered 2 additional accounts. Judith's sudden intake of breath drew everyone's attention. She glanced at me, but I maintained my placid smile. Her expression clearly indicated anger. Dawn proceeded. As of the separation date, Mrs. Halliday had $217,674 across those 2 accounts. I have documented this for submission to the court. I propose the assets be divided in the usual manner. Mr. Halliday, despite being unfairly dismissed for defending himself, is not requesting spousal support. The prenuptial agreement stipulates that the adulterer covers all expenses, so I will send my invoice to my colleague for settlement within 7 days. Judith's lawyer stood up, My lord, I contest Mr. Halliday's claimed amounts. The mentioned accounts are her pension funds, which were temporarily withdrawn due to financial transactions and should be disregarded. They were intended for reinvestment, but due to emotional distress from the divorce, this was not done. My client disputes Mr. Halliday's assertion of being owed over $47,000 from the household account. As previously requested, I seek counseling. Dawn responded, the deposits into these accounts correspond to bonuses received from her employment. Furthermore, the relevant paperwork refutes the claim that these are her pension funds. The sheriff adjourned for lunch shortly thereafter, instructing Judith's lawyer to verify the truthfulness of the statements made in court that morning with his client. He emphasized his distaste for deception and hoped for honesty. After lunch, Judith's lawyer confirmed the authenticity of Dawn's testimony. The judge granted the divorce claim and ordered Judith to pay me $118,000. He dismissed the claim for $105,000, which she spent deliberately to embarrass her husband. In his resume, he expressed his clear disapproval of her behavior in relation to adultery and concealment of assets. Averil's article in the newspaper was excellent. It covered all the key points, except for the amount awarded. Judith, Bryant, Harvey, and Bennett have been publicly named and criticized. I was relieved to be rid of Judith, but I wanted more, much more. Judith and her family were devout churchgoers. They didn't approve of my not visiting. 2 weeks later, on Mother's Sunday, they must have been shocked to find more than 60 photos of their daughter performing various acts with Bryant, as well as 20 more photos depicting a priest and the wife of a local politician. Danny had set up the camera a day earlier when the room was unlocked. We discovered the recording only later during the viewing, which showed the priest's involvement. According to reports, the entire congregation was furious. The minister had to flee from his wife's brothers, and Judith's father nearly had a heart attack. What's written in those 10 commandments anyway? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Perhaps they should have taken that one more seriously. 5 weeks later, I found myself back in court against Bennett, Harvey, and Bryant. Avril was once again in the reporter's seat. Bennett's lawyer attempted to have her removed, but the sheriff decided the case was of public interest. Dawn called me to testify. I was on the stand for over an hour as she questioned me. I recounted instances where Harvey had instructed me to cover for Bryant, the canceled holiday, and the unpaid wages. I explained how withdrawals from our joint account coincided with these events. When I confronted Bennett, he simply laughed, aware of Bryant openly boasting about the affair. I described finding incriminating texts and emails between them, revealing their collusion. I concluded by stating I hadn't received payment for my notice period, with Bryant receiving it instead of me. Dawn's final 2 questions were about the dynamics between Bennett, Harvey, Bryant, and the rest of the staff over the past 15 months. I responded, detailing mistreatment and threats from Harvey whenever I raised issues about covering for Bryant or fixing his mistakes. Bennett, on the other hand, often smirked rather than addressing my concerns. My colleagues seemed to share an inside joke at my expense, leveraging my dedication, while Harvey even had me use my personal phone to save company costs, installing a tracker on the company's SIM card so Bryant could monitor my movements. When asked if I would have worked as hard for them had I known earlier, I firmly stated no, revealing I had other job offers, but stayed out of loyalty. Dawn submitted all relevant documents to the court, including emails, texts, business records, claims, and payment details. Bennett's lawyer initially claimed I fabricated allegations of non-payment and bullying, but my meticulous record-keeping disproved his assertions. At the trial, Bennett's lawyer argued that his client hadn't received the papers on time to prepare a defense. Dawn promptly presented a time-stamped recording of me serving Bennett personally, exposing his lawyer's misinformation. The lawyer, frustrated with Bennett's deception, requested a brief adjournment to confer with his client, which the sheriff granted. Upon his return, the lawyer called Bennett to testify. He attributed the delay in my payment to an oversight caused by the termination of the contract with the client. He instructed the finance department to pay my dues immediately. His lawyer did not ask if he was aware of or involved in the case. When Bennett was about to leave the witness stand, Dawn stood up. "Just a minute, Mr. Bennett," she said, smiling, warning him that she was going to contradict him. "Mr. Bennett, do you actively encourage employees to engage in extramarital affairs during working hours?" Both Bennett and his lawyer looked at her. Bennett stammered, "No. Such incidents can happen, but I don't hire based on that." Dawn looked at the document in front of her. Mr. Harvey was fired from his previous job due to accounting fraud and adultery with his secretary. Mr. Bryant was fired because of allegations of harassment by 5 women. Mr. Carter fired for adultery with 3 colleagues. Mrs. Simmons fired from her last job for adultery with the husband of the owner's daughter. She spends 2 days a week in your office, right? Harvey, Bryant, Carter, and sometimes you talk about her. You're discussing the wives of other employees you've slept with. You share your rude jokes about husbands you've cheated on, like Mr. Halliday, who foolishly trusted you despite being a decent man. Bennett's wife, who supported him, left. It was clear from her expression that he was going to pay back. "Explain to me why you think hiring people solely for close contacts is legal, because that's exactly what you're doing." Bennett blushed, unable to respond. His lawyer attempted to intervene, but the sheriff insisted the question was pertinent given the complaint at hand. Bennett remained silent. Sending emails to Mrs. Halliday advising her on how to mistreat her husband. How does that align with being a responsible employer? Did those actions meet health and safety standards for the well-being of your employees? Knowing about your wife's affair with your colleague and not informing him. Does that show care for your employees or an obsession with causing harm to someone superior to you? The only logical reason was needing his skills, yet you still mistreated him with Harvey's assistance. You sent him away so Bryant could be with his wife. Is that how a caring employer behaves? Upon discovering the truth, instead of supporting him, you mocked him and later terminated him unfairly. Without him, your company's true nature has been revealed. All these actions constitute workplace harassment and bullying. You're just a bully and a maniac. Dawn continued. Who proposed the plan for Bryant to sleep with Mrs. Halliday to get back at Mr. Halliday? Bennett glanced down. The sheriff insisted he respond. It was Bryant. He despised Halliday. He knew he was the superior engineer, but there was more to it. Why did you go along with it? I saw Halliday as a failure. He was forgettable in a crowd. It amused me to see that clueless guy oblivious. But it stopped being funny when Bryant started talking about Judith and how bad it was. We orchestrated his discovery. We thought he'd give in. We could have mocked him for months, made him a cuckold. But he fought back. He screwed us over big time. All the clients who preferred him have left us. Bryant's terrified to show his face now. Harvey panics at the mention of his name. When he mentioned engineering it, I looked up. No wonder Bill stayed silent. He was part of it. They had spotted me and were laughing at me all along. Screw them. Dawn pressed on. Who suggested that Mr. Halliday should foot the bill for all the hotel bookings? Harvey did. He had a grudge against Halliday for always making him look like a bad manager. The vacation? That was Bryant and Harvey. I laughed so hard I went along with it. Dawn whispered, Theft of Mr. Halliday's wages? Bennett spluttered, and his lawyer stood challenging the accusation. The judge allowed it, contextualizing their actions. Bennett admitted, Harvey and Bryant were involved. We took advantage of Judith's information that he never audited the accounts. Why did you terminate him without cause? Bennett exploded. No cause. The bastard exposed us, making fools of us. He stood there smirking as Bryant nearly vomited. He defecated in fear, his glare filled with hatred towards us. I never knew he harbored such rage. If I'd known, I never would have participated. Leaving him would have meant living in fear of his revenge. He placed laxative chocolates in the kitchen, causing people to wait in line for the bathrooms. Many had accidents. He sprayed toilet bowls, automatic machines with contraceptives and feminine hygiene products with some kind of substance. People cried in agony from the burning. No one saw him, but we're certain it was him. Quietly, Dawn remarked, "Just as you unjustly accuse Mr. Halliday of everything without proof. You bullied and stole from him because you envy the man he is. You're pitiful." Dawn sat back down. The sheriff struggled to suppress a laugh as Bennett described the predicament his staff had gotten into. Later, he discussed it with Dawn and believed it was entirely justified. Had it gone to court, and I been found guilty, he would have reprimanded me. Next was Bryant. He told his lawyer it was meant as a harmless retaliation for a past school incident where I had beaten him up. Judith and Bryant formed a bond over devising ways to humiliate me, which lasted longer than expected. The holiday was essentially about rubbing my nose in it. Dawn asked a single question. "Did you ever pay for the room you used or the beer you drank at his house?" Bryant looked down. "No." Harvey's situation was even worse. Dawn exposed his falsification of payment and annual leave records, ensuring his deceit was on the court record. If Bennett's company went bankrupt, as seemed likely, it would reflect poorly on him to any future employer. The sheriff withheld judgment for 2 weeks. Before the deadline, he queried Dawn about whether I had been compensated as Bennett had suggested. The answer was no. During the final statement, he left them all with no defense. He ruled in our favor on all counts. He granted me $200,000 for their actions and $33,000 for unpaid salary. Additionally, he stipulated that none of them would receive any salary until all payments to me were made. He warned that attempts to declare bankruptcy to avoid payment would fail, as the firm's bank balance exceeded $2 million and offenders would face significant jail time. Bennett was also made responsible for my legal expenses. I received full payment by the next day. Bennett paid Dawn's legal fees in full, not at a discounted rate. I relished my newfound freedom and felt better than I had in years. I took on several consulting and repair jobs, which convinced me that instead of working for others who might betray me, I should work for myself. The major expense was acquiring specialized diagnostic equipment, many of which cost between $20,000 and $30,000. Bennett chose to liquidate the company to salvage what he could, but few clients remained loyal. On the sale day, Danny attended to bid on equipment on my behalf. Although I knew I couldn't attend, I had set a budget of $30,000. The first 4 items I wanted were in the catalog, and I expected each to be priced over $10,000. I was pleasantly surprised when Danny called to say he secured all 4 for $17,000. I instructed him to try to acquire more items I had marked. Later, he called again. He had spent the entire budget, but 2 items remained from my list, and I had marked a limit of $3,000 each on them. He offered to lend me the money, but I declined, instructing him to purchase them if possible. I started Halliday Mechanical Services with those. I opted to lease a van instead of buying one as the costs were comparable, but I avoided being tied to future trade-in values. Reaching out to my former clients quickly filled my schedule. Former colleagues from Bennett's called hoping for a job. Not a chance. One afternoon, I happened to drive past the hotel where Judith and Bryant had stayed. I had treated Danny to several beers, but hadn't done anything for Kate. I dropped by and was pleased to find her working at reception. She greeted me with a smile. "Can I assist you, sir?" She was stunning. She had been a lovely girl, but now she was a grown woman. Danny hadn't exaggerated when he described her figure. I was immediately captivated by her smile. "Kate, I'd like to take you to dinner to thank you for what you did for me with Danny. If you'd prefer something else, I'm open to that. I owe you a lot." She smiled again. "You can take me to dinner here tomorrow night at 7. I finish at 6, but I'll freshen up here and try to look presentable for you." I smiled back. "You're more than presentable. You're beautiful even in professional attire. I'll be here in good time. Thank you for not turning me away." We exchanged smiles, and I left feeling like I had hit the jackpot. I was relieved that my job the following day was nearby and went smoothly. I wrapped up early and headed home. After a quick shower and shave, I agonized over my outfit choice. I wanted to make a good impression, but wasn't sure what would suffice. I felt more nervous than I did on my first date at 15, realizing my wardrobe needed an update. I arrived at 6:45 p.m., feeling incredibly anxious. A few minutes later, she appeared. She was stunning. Her auburn hair framed her face before flowing gracefully down to her shoulders. Her green eyes sparkled with joy, and her lips seemed perfectly kissable. Her blue dress revealed a hint of cleavage, accentuating her generously endowed figure. With a toned abdomen and long legs that looked like she ran regularly, she wore heels that brought her close to my height. She laughed at my reaction. That's when I noticed my jaw hanging open. "I'm sorry," I stammered, "but you look absolutely gorgeous. I haven't been this tongue-tied since I was 15. She chuckled and extended her hand towards mine. Leading me to the restaurant, she took charge effortlessly. I couldn't quite recall what I ate, only that it marked the most extraordinary evening of my life. Following dinner, we adjourned to the lounge for drinks. I was grateful I had opted for a taxi. Even sober, I doubted my ability to drive. She was remarkably astute, and our conversation spanned myriad subjects. Never once did she critique my opinions. Instead, she gently probed whenever we diverged, enriching our discourse. Her laughter illuminated the room. It was well past 10 when duty called, prompting her departure. I assured her I'd take a taxi home and offered to drop her off first. We did just that, finding her residence a mere half-mile from mine. Before parting at the hotel, I confessed, "Kate, I came tonight feeling indebted to you. I've never experienced an evening like this. If you don't mind me being forward, I'd love to see you again." She responded by kissing me, a sensation akin to being struck by lightning. Swiftly, she took my phone, entering her number and asking for mine. She promised to email her schedule so we could plan future outings. We've been dating for 3 months now. I know she has a great figure. We hug and kiss. Even though we weren't close because of my caution about emotional involvement, she's so adorable that sometimes I convince myself that she might be like Judith, even though I know she's not. When she's busy, I have my own things to do. I've been watching Bryant lately. He becomes more confident when he goes outside, although he hesitated after Harvey was beaten up. I was suspected, but I had an alibi because I worked at a factory 100 miles away with other people. Later, I found out that Harvey had suffered serious injuries which forced him to leave the city. It was easier to deal with Bennett. He frequents the golf club and has been caught speeding 3 Fridays in a row. He has been banned from driving for 10 years. He needs to take sobriety tests and retake the driving test to get his license. He was also fined £5,000. It is rumored that his wife has abandoned him and is filing for divorce, demanding substantial damages for adultery. However, my attention is focused on Bryant. I eventually caught him walking to the pub through the park. It's better not to tell you what I did to him here, but he'll have it for the rest of his life. The next day, I was at home with Kate when the police called about Bryant's assault. I had to admit that I didn't have an alibi. I didn't want to involve a friend in something that could lead to imprisonment. Everything I was wearing, clothes, mask, underwear, gloves, was burned and completely destroyed before I returned home. I've never even talked to him. Kate chuckled as she talked to the officers, saying, "There's no way I could have done that. We spent the whole day in bed. My friends have never seen me so happy." The police left. I looked at Kate. She was smiling. I took her hand and pulled her to me. "I'd better try to keep giving you joy in case you get hooked up to a lie detector." I was joking. She snuggled closer. Just in time. She teased me back, kissing me. Soon we were in bed and had a nice time. We hugged a little more. Finally, she stood up and said, "I think it's time for me to go home. Early shift tomorrow." I smiled and said, "I would be glad if you would stay. I never expected this to happen. We weren't ready for something like this." I watched her as she got dressed. Her figure was truly amazing, and she carried herself confidently. We kissed several times at my door. I reminded her that I would be away from work for the next 2 nights. I hope it doesn't take too long for the 3rd night, but I'll call her as soon as I'm free and her shift is over. When she left, I returned to the bedroom. Our scent was in the air. A wonderful smell. It was my best night's sleep in months. The job turned into a nightmare. Everything was going awry. Every time I fixed one part, another one went out of order. It was an older model that I recommended replacing 2 years ago. A new machine was ordered, but it was supposed to be delivered only in 6 months, so I had to settle for repairs. 2 days stretched into 4. Kate and I were talking on the phone. I was pleased to hear her voice and listen to her talk about how she spent the day. She laughed when I described the ongoing troubles. The time I spent alone forced me to confront my future. Since Judith, I hadn't pursued another relationship, uncertain if I could trust again. Kate had patiently waited for me to be ready. Imagining my life without her was bleak. It seemed like it would be even worse than what I had experienced with Judith. If there was anyone for me now, it would be Kate. I knew I loved her more deeply than anyone before. I needed to have a conversation with her about my feelings and what I needed. The day I returned home, Kate was working late until 11 p.m., so I expected not to see her. I was occupied sorting out my invoice for a job when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. It was Kate, looking visibly worried. I welcomed her in. As I moved to kiss her, she held me back and concern washed over me. Softly, almost sadly, she spoke. "Adam, while you were away, Judith was at the hotel with her colleagues for a presentation. Afterward, she spoke to me. She's aware that we've been seeing each other. She asked me to ask you to meet with her. You haven't spoken since the papers were served. She's willing to meet you wherever you choose. She assured me she doesn't intend to harm us. She wants to explain everything face to face. I'm afraid you might still have feelings for her. You never bring her up. She's more experienced than I am. So your bed life with her was probably better than the one we had before. I don't want to lose you, but I'd rather know now than later." Tears were nearly streaming down her face by the time she finished. "Kate, during my time away, I did a lot of introspection. I've come to love you in a way I never thought possible. I've never felt for anyone the way I feel for you. I kept my distance because I was afraid of being hurt again, even though every rational thought told me you would never betray me. I never mentioned Judith because I feel nothing but contempt for her and for myself for allowing her to treat me like this. You don't have to think that our bed life with her was better. The fact that you talked to me during intimacy meant more to me than anything she's ever done. The night we spent together was the best of my life because we enjoyed each other, not just ourselves. Judith is right about one thing. It's probably time we talked. But she should know I'll never forgive or forget what she did. She has no hold over me anymore. You said you waited until I was ready. You were willing to wait because to you, I was worth it, especially if it meant being together in the end. I kept telling myself to open up to love again, but I was scared. You took that fear away. I want you in my life." Kate rushed into my arms and kissed me passionately. As we parted, she whispered, "I have a rain check, remember?" We were close that night. Waking up next to her in the morning was something special for me. Later, I drove her to her apartment. I stayed there for a while before going to work. A week later, I met Judith at a cozy bar nearby. She seemed to have lost weight and lost her former self-confidence. We ordered coffee. She began like this. Adam, thank you for meeting me. Obviously, Kate makes you happy. I haven't seen you this pleased in years, if at all. She's different from me, so take a chance. She's a wonderful woman. I want to apologize, although it may sound unconvincing coming from me, a harsh critic. I thought deeply about why I ruined our marriage. At first I blamed you, but Janine wouldn't let me. She made me realize the scale of my mistakes. I went to a psychologist who helped me uncover some bitter truths about myself and why I did what I did. I still have a lot to do. I could go on for weeks, but I'll be brief. I've always been selfish, self-centered. I used to think that I was superior to others. When I met you, I saw a man who was kind, loving, and didn't realize the impact he had on people. You approach everything in good faith. I like that about you, a feeling I'd never experienced before. You loved me and would give me anything I wish for that love if you could. A diamond set from our honeymoon, even though it meant we couldn't afford the tour you really dreamed of. Over time, I began to perceive your attempts to please me not as love, but as a manifestation of weakness. When we discussed the possibility of having children, at first I really wanted to do it. But since I stopped understanding who you are and therefore respect you, I decided not to do it. Again, you didn't mind. You always put me first, and I didn't realize the importance of it until it was too late. When I met Brian at the event, I was interested in talking to your opponent. In the end, I trusted him too much, and we started dating, mostly discussing you. He took advantage of my disrespect for you. A few weeks later, we ended up in bed, and I barely resisted. Later, I heard him mocking me in conversations with others. He doesn't meet the requirements. I wouldn't even give him 1 out of 100. I kept seeing him just for the pleasure of deceiving you. The guilt of doing things to him that I never allowed you to do was gnawing at my conscience. I tried something new with him, but he was inadequate. My actions caused me remorse, but I took out my self-loathing on you, turning your life into a living hell. In fact, hell would be better. The desire to humiliate you grew stronger. I still don't understand why I ever thought that way. How could you be humiliated when you didn't even know? Why did I feel such animosity towards you? I was deeply embarrassed when Bryant mentioned coming on that holiday instead of you. I knew that trip was supposed to mend things between us, but once again the thrill and foolishness took over. Harvey and Bennett were in on it too. Until then, I had no idea Bryant was sharing everything with them. I was consumed with guilt, becoming cold and rejecting your attempts at intimacy, because I couldn't bear to face my own feelings. I knew you didn't deserve the way I was treating you. Every time I tried to stop, Bryant found a way to degrade you, and like an addict, I allowed it. I didn't find out until the court case that they had orchestrated the job, posted the photos to publicly shame you. I'm so sorry. When you found out, you didn't say anything, but when we clashed again that weekend, your words cut deep, echoing what my conscience had been telling me all along. I had denied you intimacy, and even before that, I was only concerned with my own pleasure. When you mentioned divorce, I almost lost control. Despite everything, I never wanted to lose you. What a foolish way to demonstrate that. The 2 days with Bryant were meant to be the last. If I had known you already knew, I never would have gone through with it. As I listened to Dawn during the divorce and the case against Bennett, I felt overwhelming guilt. My recklessness had brought so much pain upon you, and you didn't deserve any of it. I was deeply ashamed of my behavior. I realized that the only person truly humiliated in this whole situation was myself, and perhaps I deserved that. I couldn't believe the money I had wasted on that man. When we left the church and saw the photos of us, and even the ones of the minister, I knew you were behind it. I was furious, but deep down I knew I deserved it. That was when I decided to seek counseling. After the incident, I ran into Bryant and decided to get even. It happened at a club where I publicly informed the woman he was with that she wouldn't worry too much about his tiny instrument and poor skills. Do yourself a favor and find a real man. She followed my advice. She chuckled and continued. I heard that he doesn't work anymore, but no one got caught. My father and brother caught up with him and forced him to return all the money he owed me. He's been limping for weeks. I noticed it, but I never understood why. I sincerely regret that I was so self-centered, mistaking love for submission and caring for weakness. I'm sorry for making your life unbearable, even though you were always there for me, even when it was difficult for me. I'm moving to another office to leave the city. Every time I come here, all I get is unwanted attention. I need to start over, get a chance to get better. I may not find anyone who is as good as you, but losing you is my fault. I misinterpreted your actions, committed out of love, as weakness, when in fact they were strength. You didn't do anything wrong. If I can give you some advice, what I learned in therapy, it's okay to disagree and want different things, but talk about it. Don't give in just to make the other person happy. Express your opinion. Bennett was right about one thing only. You're an exceptionally skilled engineer. I'm not surprised to hear you're thriving. You're a truly good person, but you lack confidence in yourself. Share with Kate the emotions that have been bottled up because of me. Let's be a team. She'll be good for you. With great sadness, she concluded, I'm such a fool. She stood and said goodbye to me. I returned home to find Kate, anxiously waiting. I uttered those 5 little words, Kate, we need to talk. I smiled as she raised her eyebrows. I kissed her gently. I recounted everything that had happened, how Judith had mistreated me and that jerk Bryant. I told her about my feelings of inadequacy, about how I couldn't believe I deserved a life with her. She cried as I finished. I cried too. For the first time in my life, I had unburdened myself. We ended up crying together, holding each other close. After we cried ourselves out, she wiped my face and said, Adam, Judith was right about 2 things. What a wonderful person you are and how little you realize it. Perhaps counseling could help you as much as it helped her. When you mentioned children, I heard the pain in your voice. This is a wonderful house with a large plot that can be expanded and turned into an ideal family home. If we decide to live here permanently, I would like you and me to have children. As for our closeness, I still have a lot to learn. I want to please you, so we should discuss our desires and fantasies. We can explore the world and enjoy learning together. I don't see you the way Judith sees you. I don't think your caring makes you weak. I see a strong person who strives to improve himself and help others. We will have disagreements and quarrels, but I will always love and respect you. Do you remember our first night? Throughout the dinner, we even talked about our differences, learning how different points of view enrich our lives. We both need to communicate openly. I interrupted then, suggesting, I think you should move in with me and bring all your underwear. I might have to inspect them to ensure they're appropriate for your job. You might need ones that cover from your chest to your knees. I didn't finish my sentence as she kissed me so passionately that it nearly knocked me backward in my seat. That night we made slow, passionate love. She ended up moving in with me and we discussed the possibility of renting out her flat. She wanted to wait a few months to make sure I was happy. A few weeks after she moved in, I was at the safe when she noticed the jewelry boxes. She insisted that I take them out. I opened the large one containing the diamond set and shared its story with her, including the missed tour I had wanted to take. I had intentionally kept this from Judith because of her betrayal with Bryant. I blushed as I opened the small box. Kate, this is a family heirloom. I gave it to Judith but kept it. It's an engagement ring. I've been thinking of asking you to marry me for a few weeks now. I spoke to your dad and he's thrilled, as is your mom. Kate, will you marry me? If you say yes, we will find a new ring for you. She looked into my eyes, smiling, and tears were streaming down her face. She replied softly, Yes. Our lips met, and we made love in my office. I would not recommend using computer chairs. Our laughter could be heard at the opposite end of the room. Later, she opened the box and exclaimed, "What a beautiful ring!" I will wear it with pride, although the size will need to be changed. I won't wear the diamond set because of its history. I think you should give it to Judith as a parting gift. She kissed me again, and we made love again. I contacted Judith and arranged for her to give me a diamond set. She was deeply grateful, saying that it would remind her of selfless love if she ever felt tempted to stray from the path. We attended counseling together, which helped me a lot, although it was nothing compared to her love. After our first meeting, she had a quiet conversation with a psychologist who wrote something down for her. Over the next few days, she immersed herself in a book. She didn't try to conceal it from me, but she never volunteered any details about it either. On the third evening, she approached me saying, "Adam, we need to talk." This time I found myself raising my eyebrows. She kissed me passionately, and for a moment it felt like we might fuse together. She tried to keep her voice steady, but excitement was evident as she said, "This book is what the consultant recommended to improve our bed life." I studied Chapter 1, which she warned would be difficult. She was right. I also want you to read Chapter 1. It's not just about intimacy, but about our whole life together. The key, she said, is total honesty. I found myself almost in tears with some of my responses. I know I have a lot to learn, but I want us to learn together. When you're done with yours, we can compare notes, find similarities, understand our differences, discuss our dreams, and how we can achieve them. Then we can start building what we want on a solid foundation. I skimmed through the rest of the book. I think we'll enjoy some of the exercises. There are things I've never heard of before. I did mention my lack of experience. We can explore these together. There's only one thing I'm sure about. I don't want to involve others. I promise to listen and try most things, but I wouldn't want to bring another man or woman into our relationship. I relaxed and said to Kate, "I'll handle Chapter 1. I'm open to involving others. I'm excited about our exercises. Have I told you today that I love you?" Kate shook her head, so I kissed her, which led to us making love in the kitchen. Later, she noticed me smiling and asked, "What's making you so happy?" I took her hand and replied, "Being with you. Knowing that there's no room off limits for us if we get carried away. Knowing that you want to please me as much as I want to please you. I love you." It was clear that Kate was incredibly good for me. I was noticeably happier, and many people commented on it. My business thrived. I hired 3 additional engineers after careful vetting. They weren't just excellent engineers, but also trustworthy, loyal, and in stable marriages. They wouldn't betray others or tolerate such behavior from colleagues. Kate helped with office tasks when her schedule allowed, but as my business expanded, we talked about options. Her working full-time for me, hiring office staff. She enjoyed her job at the hotel, where she had diverse responsibilities, front of house and various behind-the-scenes roles. She had the skills for my office, but if we had children, we would need additional help. So, I set up an office, hired an assistant who handled most administrative tasks. Kate managed much of the accounting, which she found manageable thanks to my organization. Together, we have carefully worked through the Book of Intimacy and reviewed it many times. Some of the exercises were great and we really enjoyed them, while some were not bad, but not quite in our spirit. One of them, which we both sincerely liked, had a funny ending. Kate played a naughty secretary who constantly made the same mistake. She looked amazing in stockings and suspenders. Just when I was about to fire her, she offered to be punished instead. That's what I did. When we finally left my office, Cheryl, our receptionist, was there blushing furiously. We arrived much earlier than usual and took much longer than expected. Kate explained everything to Cheryl, who burst out laughing. She promised to try not to make mistakes anymore. Kate and I had a modest wedding. Danny was my best man, and her sister Jacqueline was my bridesmaid. Her parents were overjoyed to see us both so happy. They've always treated me like the son they never had. I couldn't have dreamed of better relatives on my wife's side. Kate insisted that I spend a second honeymoon, carefully planning it for me. She organized the tour I dreamed of during my first honeymoon. We both enjoyed exploring the ancient sites, although I'm more interested in history than she is. In return, I tolerated her love of roller coasters by accompanying her to several theme parks the following week. However, one evening when we were returning to the hotel, she surprised me by saying that she was a commando. By accident or not, I wasn't sure. We quickly finished most of the dishes, trying to get to the hotel room as quickly as possible. A few months later, her parents were delighted to hear about the birth of their first grandson. Kate and I temporarily moved into her apartment while the builders renovated and expanded our house. The renovation was completed a month before the birth of our firstborn, Gordon. He was followed by his sister, Jennifer, and later by another son, John. Kate worked hard to maintain her figure and vitality. She succeeded by remaining a wonderful mother, while I tried my best as a father. And her parents like to take their grandchildren out of our hands about once a month. This is a win-win option for all participants. After 11 years, my team now includes 12 engineers and 6 office staff. Cheryl keeps a close eye on possible problems with the secretaries. If we're late, she prefers to work outside my office. It is important to note that there were never any mistakes on her part, and I never reprimanded her. Since the company is small, I value relationships with my employees, including Cheryl's husband, and would never do anything that could harm them. I still carefully vet new employees and avoid hiring those who don't take their work seriously. Kate still loves to surprise me in the bedroom. As for Judith, I sometimes see her when she visits her parents. She's doing well professionally, but she's still single. One day, Kate noticed that she looked sad and envious when she was having dinner with Janine at a local restaurant, where we happened to be with the children. We greeted her as we left. Judith's affair eventually led me to Kate, and I think it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Her love and support have brought me great happiness. Even now, every kiss with Kate makes me happy.